Guys, this is Miss Frazier, and I'm going to be doing your transformations foldable with you this weekend. So before you start, please make sure that you have something to write with. So you know, I am actually going to be using two colors. So you might also want to get two colors as well. I'm using blue and I'm using black. I'm going to use blue for all of the things that are happening vertically. So anytime that something is happening to my y value or f of x, I'm going to use my blue. And anytime something is happening to my x value, I'm going to use black. So if you want to use two colors as well, just pause the video, go ahead and do that. Also, make sure you have your purple foldable. You want to make sure it's already cut out and ready to go. So you're cutting it apart and making all of these little flaps for every single rule that we're looking at for transformations, okay? Okay, so once you have your supplies, you can play the video again. Okay, so let's go through this. Okay, so with Move the Monster, we looked at all sorts of things that happened, okay? And we actually started in a different order than what we're looking here on the foldable, but we're just going to go ahead and we're going to go in order with our foldable. And I'm just going to start by paying attention what is happening, what is changing, okay, for each of these. So if we look at the first one, I have A times F of X, where A is greater than 1. Okay, so I have a value here that I'm multiplying by f of x. So if I'm multiplying by f of x, I'm changing my y value. And I'm multiplying it, which is going to cause a vertical stretch. Okay, so my function is actually going to stretch along the y-axis vertically. Okay, in the next flap, we have A times f of x once again. So I've got some sort of something happening to my y value. But this time it says that A is going to be greater than 0, but less than 1. So notice that it's between 0 and 1. A cannot be 0 or less than 0 because then my function, if I multiply by 0, would just become 0. So we're not going to have that. It's going to be between 0 and 1. And we'll deal with the negatives when you get a little further down in your foldable. Okay, so when this happens, once again, I have a vertical, so I'm going to stick with my blue color here. But now I have a vertical compression. So it's going to appear that my function actually, what we called in my class, actually shrinks. It gets pressed together. Okay, now I have f, and in my parentheses, notice I have a value here next to my x. So you can see now that the change is not happening to the entire function. I'm not taking f of x. I'm not changing my y value. Here I'm changing my x value. Okay, so if I have a value greater than 1 and I multiply by x, in my mind this is a little backwards, but now I have something happening horizontally. Okay, and when I multiply by a number greater than 1 horizontally, what's going to happen is I'm going to have a horizontal compression. Okay, so when I compress something, that means it's shrinking. So it's almost like we could call that a horizontal shrink as well. Okay, so a horizontal compression. Okay, so what if I take that x value and I multiply by a number that is between 0 and 1? So if it's between 0 and 1, I don't have a horizontal compression, but I have a horizontal stretch. Okay. Okay, so if we look at the next one, we can see that inside my parentheses, I'm adding c to x. So I'm adding a value to x. So I'm not changing my y again, I'm changing my x value. And again, I think this is a little, you have to think a little backwards for this, but when I add a value to x, what we learned from our monster is that, once again, I should be sticking with my black. I have a horizontal change, so I'm going to call this a horizontal shift. Okay, and which direction is it moving? If I'm adding, it's a horizontal shift left. Okay, so if I subtract a value from x, I'm not going to have a horizontal shift left, but I'm going to have a horizontal shift right. Okay, so the next one, I am taking a value and I'm actually adding it to f of x. So this is no longer inside of my parentheses with x, it's outside. So I'm changing my y value here. So I'm adding a value, and if I'm adding a value to y, I'm going to be changing I'm going to have a vertical change, and it's going to be a vertical shift up. And if I have f of x and I subtract a value, so I'm taking y, subtracting a value, I'm going to have a vertical shift down. Okay, these are the last ones, and in my class we actually did not get to these in the monster packet. But if you observe what happens, and we will finish that up on Monday, you're going to notice, first of all, this negative is inside my parentheses here. Okay, and remember the value that comes before x right here. And if you think back when you're doing transformations, that there is an imaginary number 1 here before the x, because any number or anything times 1 is itself. Okay, so here I'm making my x values all opposite. Okay, so if I make all of my x values opposite, what is going to happen? Again, I am going to have a horizontal change. And this is a little confusing, but if I have a horizontal change, meaning I'm going to actually take my image and I'm actually going to flip it over. So I'm going to have a horizontal flip. Or a horizontal reflection. And it's going to reflect across my y-axis. But that actually means, if you watch my hand, that I'm actually flipping it across horizontally, but it's flipping over the y-axis. Okay, so if you can imagine that. Okay, so for the last one, I have negative f of x. So you can see here, this time, I'm changing my whole entire function. It's not inside the parentheses. So I'm making all of it negative. I'm changing my y value to a negative. So I'm going to have, I may have mixed my colors up here. Hope oh, I didn't. Okay, good. I'm going to have a vertical change, and it's going to be a vertical flip or vertical reflection. Okay, so if you think about it, again, I'm going to be flipping it over, and it's going to appear that I am actually flipping over my x-axis here. Okay, so it's a vertical reflection because it's flipping up or flipping down, but it's flipping across the x-axis. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your reflections. Okay. Okay, so if you are in my class, you need to please make sure that you respond to the question that is listed on Edmodo. And if you are in Ms. Dulock's class, please also check Edmodo for anything extra that you need to be doing. And I hope you have a great weekend.